friends and partners of Jubilee Christian Center.
Hey everybody, welcome to Jubilee. I'm Pastor Dick Bernal with my partner in Mischief, Kingdom Mischief, Larry Huggins, and welcome to Studio J here on the campus of Jubilee Christian Center. Before we get started, Debbie Fraser from KTLN, of course, the boss lady, we love her, sent me a really nice letter, Larry. She was recent, I won't read the whole thing, it's too long, but she was recently at a women's conference and she ran into a lady who said how much she enjoyed KTLN and that she gave her heart to Christ watching the Jubilee program. And what a great blessing. It was a little birthday greeting. And to me, I just turned, I forget it, I don't have to tell you. Who needs to talk numbers? But
72.
Shut up, Larry Huggins. He's right behind me. You know what we're going to do today, Larry, is in a moment, we're going to introduce, wait, by the way, hold the presses. A couple things coming up in December I really want you to be aware of. If you're a pastor watching, Ed Silvoso and I want to invite you to a dinner. It's all on us. We're going to give gifts to the wives. It's going to be a great time on Thursday night, December the 1st. We're going to have some of our TBC friends here for the Bay for Christ. Ed Silvoso is going to be co-hosting the dinner. We're going to talk about some very interesting things coming up next year. Dr. Cho, looks like Rick Warren, some other tremendous men of God, women of God are going to be coming to San Jose, and we want you to be part of it. Plus, we just want to have a Christmas get-together with you. So if you can make it, let us know ASAP. Also, on December the 2nd, our friend Clint Brown's going to be doing a little preaching and a concert on a Friday night. He's one of the best. I think he's written 300 songs. Just about every award you could think of. You know what surprised me, Larry? I've listened to Clint for 30 years. I've actually preached for Clint in Orlando. I had no idea he could preach that good. That boy can preach as good. He's a preacher, and he'll do that on Sunday. And then the Katinas are going to be here in concert on Wednesday night, the 14th of December. So a lot of good things happening in the month of December. Hey, let's talk about the Power One, and in just a moment, Larry, you interviewed my son Adam, who was a history major at San Jose State, and he hasn't stopped reading and studying everything from church history to Greek, Roman history, Civil War history, Revolutionary War history, and he's a bit of we call him the church brainiac. And you brought up something interesting, or you sparked some conversation with him about the Renaissance. Yeah. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about the Power of One. Just recently, we had Nancy Duarte, who's right now arguably the #1 public speaker on the power of a story. Just about every Fortune 500 company that I know of has used her to influence from the CEO down to the staff. And Nancy brought up how strong and how powerful an idea is that actually goes vertical, it grows legs, it becomes a reality. Talk about that a little bit.
What a great presentation on Saturday morning. Jay works here at Jubilee, and we had 2 presentations, but I think I took more away from hers. I mean, they were both outstanding. But this idea of the power of a story is very compelling, that it's one thing to have a vision, to have an idea, but it's another thing to be able to relate that to people. And she said stories are much better than presentations. She said people stay engaged with the story and it kind of goes flat with the presentation. And so she asked why. And she came up with this beautiful teaching. I think it's probably taken her years to develop this. Even did it on TED Talks about how to get your message out there, connecting it with a story, which we know that's how Jesus always operated.
Well, the parables, we remember his stories, the beautiful parables, a little different than a proverb. A proverb is a 2-lined poem, some of them juxtaposed because they're lined up, but one says this, but the other one says that. But a parable is what? It's a spiritual, it's a story using nature, using terra firma, things in the ocean, whatever, to illustrate a spiritual, eternal truth.
Yeah, a parable.
A parable.
Yeah, a parable it's a story. And I think one of the reasons people, well, I'll talk about me, that I love your teaching is you always have a story. You're a storyteller. I'm a storyteller.
You're a storyteller.
And you've had this happen to you, but I've had it happen to me where I preached a message and I think, boy, I really connected, and people come back, they remember the story, but they don't remember what I said. It's
Or
like,
they don't remember one
man,
scripture
that story.
or the reference, but they do remember. And the Bible is full of beautiful stories,
Yeah.
wild stories. I mean, jaw-dropping stories in the Old Testament. We make movies, still making movies out of these great stories. But Nancy was talking about Steve Jobs and like a man with an idea who caused
He changed the world.
a renaissance, a technical renaissance, if you will. He changed the world.
You see, you and I have been talking about Renaissance, and that's why I wanted to interview Adam to get his insight on the idea of a Renaissance. But we have had a Renaissance in the Bay Area, a technical Renaissance. It's been going on ever since Hewlett and Packard invented the transistor back in the 50s. San Jose has experienced a renaissance of technology, and the dot-com phenomena and everything else that's going on here. It's amazing that one place on earth would have as many ideas as the Bay Area.
And it's this fertile, this used to be called the Valley of Heart's Delight. When I was a kid, back in the 50s, I picked prunes and apricots. Started off in Wattsville where I grew up, picking berries.
I've done
it. Strawberries, blackberries. That was all.
Strawberries, hard work.
I lasted 2 days. I lasted the summer picking boysenberries and blackberries because I wanted to make money. My fingers, I was so embarrassed because my fingers were purple throughout the first 3 or 4 weeks of school. I kept my hands in my pocket, but I wanted money even as a kid. But this valley, this Silicon Valley, is magnetic. It pulls some of the brightest people from all over the world who come. They either want to be part of a vision or they have a vision.
Yeah.
And boom, look what's happening.
Well, that's what we talked to Adam about, that interview. I said, tell me why a place like Florence could become the center of the world as far as ideas and science and literature. That was the birthplace of the Italian Renaissance, which impacted Western philosophy, Western art, and of course history. Time of exploration and development. It seemed like it started, this is my understanding, with one family, the Medici family, Lorenzo de' Medici. You're talking about the power of one. I think there were other influences, but I don't think there was an influence greater than Lorenzo Medici. And that Italian Renaissance probably would not have happened if it weren't for him.
And my understanding, because I was listening to Adam as you interviewed him, was this absolutely went against the powers of Rome and the wishes of the Pope.
Yeah.
Because it was thinking outside the Catholic box of that day.
Yeah. Well, religion doesn't encourage thinking, not that kind of religion. But Renaissance was kind of a religious term. It means new life. And that's something that we Christians are very familiar with, new life. We have a new life in Christ. If any man is in Christ, he's a new creation. In other words, he has a new life. And there was such a tremendous effulgence or wellspring of life that came out of this fountain in Florence that it impacted things. And I believe that, this is me personally, but I believe that the church is going to experience a new renaissance.
Well, talk about Peter Drucker, because here's a man who at the end of his life discovered the church, the most fascinating corporation. Because
you quoted him. What's that quote?
Well, because people do stuff, they volunteer, they don't get paid.
Oh, yeah.
They give up their Sundays, they give up Wednesday night, they'll give up a Saturday and work for a God they've never seen, an ancient book. It fascinated him because of the way his mind worked. Like in Japan, he's He's known as the father of...
The modern corporation. He changed Japan. Japan. Now, you and I are old enough to remember that made in Japan was synonymous with junk.
Yeah.
If you got something that was made in Japan, or somebody gave you a gift and you saw made in Japan, it was like, thanks a lot. But then Peter Drucker went to Japan and started teaching his philosophy of constant improvement, incremental improvement, make everything a little bit better every day. And Japan soon overtook the United States in quality, and we had to catch up with Japan. You remember when the automobile industry was suffering because people didn't want to buy American anymore, they wanted to buy Japan. So I think this interview is going to be very interesting.
Well, let's go hear what Adam, my son Adam, has to say about Renaissance. We'll come right back.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pastor Larry Huggins. I'm here with Pastor Adam Bernal, and we're going to talk about the Italian Renaissance. I've heard you share some things about the Italian Renaissance, and I think it's fascinating. So tell us about the Renaissance. First of all, how do you say it? Is it Renaissance or Renaissance?
I think it's potato. It's a French word. It pretty much means rebirth or renewal. And I was an American history major, but a few times traveling to Florence, Italy for ministry, I started seeing all these art students, and then I started seeing architecture students, and then I started seeing literary majors and music majors, all in this little city in the heart of Tuscany. And I was enlightened to the notion that this was the birth of the Renaissance.
Yeah, the Italian Renaissance.
Yes, the town of Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Dante and Verdi and Brunelleschi, and it just encompasses a wide range of what was known in humanity before but had been lost.
Now, time-wise, this is, say, right before the discovery of America?
Yeah, so classically, again, when this was going on, nobody called it the Renaissance. They didn't know it. This would be a title that was attributed to it much later. But and this varies, probably from the mid-14th century, the mid-1300s, till the 17th century, the 1600s.
Well, when I was a kid, I was fascinated with Michelangelo and, David and the Sistine Chapel. And so he was one of the characters in...
Well, this is the greatest sculptor alive. He was a celebrity in his lifetime, and then gets commissioned by the Pope to travel to Rome to do fresco painting, which he had never done. And he hated it, and it was very laborious. And today, it's one of the great masterpieces in art. Not only that, but the dome at St. Peter's at the end of his life. Yeah. He had never done any type of architecture. He designs and starts, they completed after his death, the dome at St. Peter's, so you're encompassing many different genres.
So in the Italian Renaissance, there's a rebirth of advancement in literature.
Yes.
And science.
Yes.
And fashion and music and
well, it's the only
art.
Period, today we call it the Middle Ages, the period just before what we're talking about. But for a long time, maybe when we were kids, they called it the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And they called it the Dark Ages because it's the only time in human history where knowledge was lost.
Yeah.
Right? So you had great literary opuses such as Homer's Odyssey, written thousands of years ago, and then you have a 400 to 500 year period where humanity was not producing these quality of works. It would take a man like Dante, who would create his Divine Comedy and his Divine Tragedy, to create a literary piece that could rival something that ancient Greece produced. Same thing with what Michelangelo was fascinated with. It's when they were digging up and seeing Roman statues.
Oh, yeah.
The way that the human form was portrayed thousands of years before he lived, but yet he saw his own contemporaries could not produce what ancient Rome produced. So he rebirthed the classic sculpture. And you can go on and on and on. Architecture, the dome in Florence is called the Duomo, and it would be the first building that mathematics would be used in the design of the building, and this would be the first time since ancient Rome. All of this knowledge had been lost, and there's a thousand theories as to why.
Well, there was the fire at Alexandria, and huge
right, and a lot of people point the blame at the Vatican, and that they were very much to the point where science was an enemy. I mean, The Bible says there's four corners of the earth, which would imply it's flat. But yet great thinkers like Galileo, another person during the Renaissance, who knew that the earth was round. And this would clash heads with the church in Rome.
Yeah, Galileo had to recant from his position, so putting the sun at the center of our solar system.
Instead of the earth.
Instead of the earth. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about Florence, because I know it's a city that you love. You've been there. Jubilee has a sister church now in the Florence
Prato, nearby.
In the Florence area. How did a city like Florence, we don't have a whole lot of time here, but how did a city like Florence become the epicenter of the Renaissance for a period of time?
How does Motown create so much music within a 10-year period? How does a little record store owner in Memphis, Tennessee sign Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis Presley, Sam Phillips all in the same week?
Yeah.
How do these things converge? I don't know. Does thinking have thought? If thinking has thought, then maybe it would be a substance, and if it's a substance, then it would have a gravitational pull.
Well, we're going to leave the quantum physics to another interview.
So I don't know. It's one of the great questions of all time. How could a little city of 20,000 to 30,000 people produce some of the greatest masters in all genres of art? It's mind-blowing.
Now, the Medici family, he was a patron. We're not talking about modern Italy. We're talking about
Modern Italy is one nation, but before modern Italy in the 18
little city-states.
They were all city-states, exactly. And the Medici family ruled Tuscany, and they became a haven for thinkers. That's Da Vinci.
He was the patron, or
he was the financier of it. And many universities take this creed to this day. They'd be centers where people could congregate and have free thought and free expression.
So generally, the church is seen as the patron of the arts, patron of the arts. But in this case, it was a Medici family.
It was a family, a private family. And his home today is one of the great museums that houses the Galleria where the David statue of Michelangelo is. And he obviously was a different thinker than in Rome. Now, in other parts of Europe, where the Vatican didn't have such an iron fist, such as Germany, religion would have a Reformation, right? Or a Renaissance through Martin Luther. And there was parts, and the Renaissance would spill over into other parts. And it seemed the further you got away from Rome, such as England, you would have much more freedom to express different thoughts.
Spain,
And Spain as well. And then you had the great divide between Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and this is where the Orthodox Church would arise.
Yeah, the Constantine and all that. So we're gonna wrap this up. But getting back to this, I make parallels with Silicon Valley, because how do you explain the serendipity of everything that's happened here?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a child, this valley was orchards and some canneries and
a few weeks ago your dad was talking about the Bernals going back 4 generations, I think 4 generations, you would know, and how this was so different when he was a child with almond orchards. And he talked about his dad and he riding horses through the orchards.
Well, I remember starting my 2nd grade, and I was the only child in my homeroom class whose father did not work at IBM. And everybody talking about the company picnics or the company Disneyland trip, and I was the only kid. And I remember being about 7, 8 years old, realizing this is changing and changing
fast.
quickly. Yes, and today it is. I would think for high tech, this is. Looking back, they will say this has been a quote-unquote renaissance of technology here out of this valley.
It seems to be contagious. The principles of the Renaissance weren't just confined to art, but science, medicine, anatomy, politics. So how do you think that is? I want to talk just for a moment before we conclude. How do you think an idea like that can impact so many different levels of society?
There has to be a pull or a draw of some kind. There has to be some sort of a gravitational pull that no matter where you were, if you know you could get to that area, your thoughts won't be squashed.
Kind of an open heaven.
Open heaven. I think in Paul's time in the book of Acts, it was Athens. And I think that when he was in Athens, he was so excited. He told his group he was going to stay in Berea, but instead he leaves on his own. I think the allure of Athens was what pulled Paul down there. And when he got down there, he thought he was going to dazzle them, because the greatest of the thinkers throughout history had come from there. And when he got there, he bombed. And I think
I never saw it that way.
And next thing you know, he's traveled to Corinth and he's tent making. And I think it was a real blow to his ministry. But I think that shows that Paul considered himself on par with these great philosophers in his time, Epicurean or Stoic. So he goes down there thinking, I'm going to make my mark as an orator. And it did not work. But it shows that certain areas throughout history have been a pull, whether musically today, you could say like maybe Nashville. You talk technology here in Northern California. And over time, you've seen these types of things. With art, obviously, it would go from Italy into France, after the Renaissance, where Renoir, Monet, Van Gogh, and the list is...
and it's still going today.
And still going today, right.
Sure.
So it seems that these areas pull this.
Well, this has been a wonderful chat about the Renaissance, and I guess if I had a question for you, do you think there's any way we could expect to have a modern-day Renaissance? We talk about awakenings, we talk a lot in spiritual terms, but just to make a parallel, do you think that could happen? And I believe in a way it's going on in Silicon Valley and other areas around the world, but in all levels of society, could you see another new life awakening?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a cyclical thing. I don't think you can keep great thinkers down for too long, or you can't keep passionate people down for too long. I think it's technically, I think history has shown you could do it for a generation or two, but you can't do it forever. And speaking of the church, I think there will be a renaissance or a rebirth within the church. We've seemed to be so heavy word study, but I think there will be a rebirth of passion or of signs and wonders or of demonstrations. And I think that this
or innovations.
Or innovations, absolutely, or doing something different and new, because this is a new generation of people that we're trying to touch. So absolutely, I believe that'll happen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pastor Adam.
That's a fascinating story that my son shared with you. And you're right, Larry. Florence was like a precursor, if you will, to Silicon Valley. It's just the people he mentioned that came. I was just in Florence a couple of months ago, and I've been there 3 or 4 times, and I still haven't seen everything I want to see. There's so many places to go. In fact, there's a movie out called Inferno right now with Tom Hanks on the Da Vinci Code series, and I didn't realize there was a place where you could actually see Dante's death mask, which is in the movie. And Adam said he was just riding a bike around Florence a couple of months ago with some of our people on the tour, and he accidentally pulled up in front of. He always wanted to go there, and of course, like you said earlier before we started shooting, a lot of Western kind of Bible Belt religion and the perception of hell is based on Dante's Inferno.
And Dante was a big player in Italian Renaissance literature. So again, we're kind of taking this back to the idea of a Renaissance. And I was surprised when Adam I knew he was a history buff, but when he said, well, lately I've been studying Byzantine art, and I went, you have? That I don't hear that very much in
I can't even spell it.
Yeah.
I think it has a Z in there somewhere.
Well, I'm a fine arts major, so my ears perked up, and I find it very, very fascinating, and I'm with you. I think I see a parallel between where we live here in Silicon Valley and Jubilee Christian Center and Renaissance. I mean, I believe I'm down for a new Renaissance. I believe it's going to happen.
The history, we just had our 36th anniversary on November the 13th. We started in 1980. And I personally, or God used me to start a family renaissance. I'm 6th generation Bernal. We've been here since the 1776 when De Anza came over with the Bernals through Mexico and migrated up to Norte, California. And so I'm the 6th generation of Catholics. I don't even know if they were good Catholics, but they were traditional Spanish Catholics. but I'm the first born-again Christian in the Bernal family tree going way, way back. And because of my conversion, my two sisters, my brother-in-law, nieces, nephews, cousins, the first, I think, 18 months of our church, all my family members got saved and became not only members, but part of the Jubilee Christian Center. And the paper said that we were the fastest growing church that they knew of in the history of the Bay Area, because we just took off like a rocket ship the first 3 to 5 years. And we had steady growth. We've had ups and downs, kind of parallel in parallel with the economy and what have you. But you and I said, because, you know, I'm not the youngest guy in the world, and, you know, you get my age, you start thinking about other things. But I've had this renaissance, if you will, of let's take, and Nancy Duarte really helped me too with her graph of what is what you want, and how to get to where you want to be and not be satisfied or the stronghold of, well, this is as good as it's going to get, and why even try to get up here when up here is it's attainable with vision and faith and hard work. And so we're pretty excited about the future of this church called Jubilee. And, you know, we've had, 97% of people in the Bay Area don't go to church.
I know.
Why?
It's unbelievable.
Why don't they go to church? I think I know why.
Well,
they've been to church.
Yeah, it was boring.
It was boring. It was irrelevant. It was to them a waste of time. And this is cool. This is the cool San Francisco Bay Area. This isn't the Bible Belt. We're not even the cuff of the pants that the belt holds up. We're like the sole of a tennis shoe with holes out here in the left coast. But in 1980, Larry, because I have really no religious pedigree, I have no background of anything, just an iron worker, wanted to have a good time and try to get by. We attempted to do something very, very different, and we've had over 100,000 families come through this church. Pretty exciting. Hey, listen, I think we're just about out of time. We're going to do something very exciting next week, so stay tuned. Pastor Larry and Dick Bernal here sharing thoughts and information and the Word of God with you. We love you, everybody. Stay tuned. We'll see you next week.
Are you looking for something different? A church to love, a church with answers, one that enriches the community and builds up its people? Then Jubilee is your home. In the heart of Silicon Valley, with over 3.5 million people of all nationalities and demographics, we are focused on each person who walks through our doors. As a church, we believe that we are better together than apart. We believe that tomorrow is a new and better day, that no one is beyond the love of Christ. No relationship is without hope. No member is without purpose. Jubilee is more than a building. We are people who believe that change comes through unity. Join us Sundays at 9 and 11:15 a.m. in our Spanish service at 2:30 p.m. Also Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. and Friday night Spanish service at 7:30 p.m.
Thank you for watching Jubilee with Dick Bernal. If you'd like to contact us, visit our website at jubilee.org.